Welcome.
Thank you.
Have a seat. We're going to have a fireside chat, as I understand.
Excellent. Excellent.
So thanks for being with us today. I'd like to really start by just giving you the opportunity to make some opening remarks based on what you might have heard this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. And I'll have to be honest with you. I wasn't at the session this morning because I was staying in touch with what's happening in my own community after the events in Ottawa yesterday. And I know that the group this morning took a moment of silence, and that's something I think that is happening across our country this day. But I won't be able to stay for much of the proceedings today either, because following this morning's fireside chat, I don't know where the fire is. Maybe it'll be under my seat by the end of the day. But I will be going back to Hamilton to pay my respects at the Armories, which is in my riding. So that's definitely where I'm headed. So my head is kind of in a different place, and I hope to be at least somewhat articulate as we go through the discussion this morning. But I do want to say that when you talked about my history and where I come from, one of the things that I learned when I was a city councillor in Hamilton is the extent to which it takes all of us to make the world go round, to make the city go round, to make the province go round. To make our country work. And so the experience of being able to reach across a table, reach across a community and pull in ideas and perspectives and skills and knowledge from everybody you possibly can is the only road to success, in my opinion. And it's it's interesting because that hasn't always been the way that my particular political party has operated, but I think that it's definitely the case that we need to acknowledge that it takes the public sector, it takes the private sector, it takes the educational sector, it takes all of us to find the common ground and to find the ways that we can work together to grow our economy. And to make sure that that economy is serving the people of our province and our country. And I say that because I firmly believe that when we talk about the economy and when we talk about how do we grow the economy, how do we make the economy more vibrant, we should never take away the most important thing, which is people. In my opinion, people are the economy, and it's making sure that people are able to have a decent quality of life, to be able to benefit from economic growth. So, for example, and I'll wrap up because I know we have formal questions. So, for example, when the work was done by the Liberal government around the various reports on economic activity and economic growth. There was a report that was issued that talked about jobs and prosperity. If you recall, the Jobs and Prosperity report was about a couple of years ago now. And one of the things that I found frustrating about that report is that at the end of the day, it talked about prosperity, but it didn't really talk much about jobs. The idea, the common belief being that with prosperity, the jobs will come. And this is something I think that is not the best way of looking at things. I believe that if you are going to look at economic growth, or if you're going to look at how do we grow the economy, if you're going to look at how do we increase prosperity in this province, that prosperity has to be a shared prosperity. And it can't just be a prosperity that serves the few and not make sure that Ontarians, everyday people, are benefiting or benefactors of that prosperity growth. And that's something that I'm going to keep in my vision. I'm going to keep in my kind of sights as we go through the next couple of years and try to move our province forward.
Well, thanks, Andrea, and I appreciate certainly your time in light of the circumstances yesterday and today, and your responsibilities. I do want to share a few questions with you and get your remarks on those, and I'll start with certainly something very topical, which is debt and interest payments. So certainly interest payments on Ontario's debt total around $10 billion right now out of the budget. So how important is it, in your view, that we tackle this issue, and what are your solutions for returning Ontario's fiscal balance?
Look, I agree 100% with the view that that debt is not a good thing, that deficit budgets are not the best thing for our province. In fact, the founder of my party, Tommy Douglas, was one who believed quite clearly that you have to keep a balanced budget. You have to keep your books balanced. In fact, he certainly was the father of Medicare, and we know some of the great things that Tommy did. And but really, he was not prepared to do that until the books were balanced in his province when he brought Medicare on. It took him, I think, 4 terms to be in the fiscal position to be able to bring on that new social program. And so, I think the most important thing that we have to do is recognize that that as we try to get to a balanced budget, we have to do that in a balanced way. And what that means is that, in my opinion, that everybody has to share in that responsibility. So there's no doubt, the work that we do around in this conference over these next couple of days around trying to get the growth part of the solution in place, because of course we'll see increased revenues with increased growth and all of that. That's important. But we also have to realize that governments need money to be able to provide the services that people expect and rely on, and that we actually enjoy and that we're proud of, that make us a civil society. And so I think the governments need to, and particularly the provincial government, needs to take a hard look at their revenue streams. And you'll know that in the last provincial election, the New Democrats did suggest a small, modest uptick in the corporate tax rate. Now, folks in this room might not agree with that, but I firmly believe that it does take all of us to come to the table to be able to afford things like transit systems. So we talked about that, a slight, very small uptick in the corporate tax rate. Frankly, we also talked about not opening new loopholes, we called them, but we all know what that means. No, not at this point in time, while we are still in a very difficult situation fiscally in this province. Why would we be finding new ways or new places to reduce our revenues as a province? And again, I know from the perspective of many people in this room, that's what you want to see. You want to see more breaks. You want to see more, less money going to government through taxation. But I mean, we have to get I think, a handle on the fact that taxation is something that, yes, people have to pay the burden of, but so does the business sector and corporate sector have to pay the burden of. So I think that that's another big piece. And there's we'll probably get to this in one of the other questions, but there's also some real, I think, opportunities that we need to be more serious about in this province. And so we talk about the economy, we talk about growth, we talk about how do we get from where we are now to something a little bit more accelerated. And then we watch as the government, frankly, has really spent years and years and years doing not very much when it comes to the opportunities in the north, in the far north in particular, around the Ring of Fire. I mean, there's opportunities there in terms of resource and mineral extraction. There's opportunities there in terms of First Nations communities to make sure that there's some benefit that would flow to those communities. Yes, it means infrastructure investment. It means a good plan. But what it really means is getting down to brass tacks and doing something proactive, and I don't see that has happened. And so I guess the other piece of getting to a place where we don't have the same pressures in terms of our deficit also means that we have to be a little bit more bold when it comes to the opportunities that we see, to seize them and take hold of them. And then, of course, if there's a final one, it's just the watching of the expenditures. And I know that sounds kind of, perhaps cliche or perhaps not particularly thoughtful, but in fact, I've sat in the opposition for some time now. Looks like I'll be sitting in it for some time as well into the future. However, I mean, we have been frustrated. We have been frustrated by the lack of attention to the public purse. And you know what? I got in trouble, frankly. Some of the people in this room actually gave me trouble for this statement. But I actually believe that we have to be thoughtful and we have to cherish the tax dollar. We have to cherish the public dollar. We cannot be frivolous with it. And I think when people get angry about paying too much tax, frankly, it's because they don't see their dollars being treated with respect and being utilized for the things that they send them to governments for. And so that responsibility in terms of how you utilize public resources, particularly finances, is extremely important.
Okay, thank you very much. Very thoughtful response. Staying on the economic theme, we heard this morning during a panel discussion a fair bit about the importance of electricity costs in Ontario's economic sector, and I know you've expressed views before in terms of possible reforms in that area. Could you share a little bit more with us today around your thoughts around that issue and how we can improve that situation?
Sure, there's a number of different things, and I mean, I've sat around a table with the major power producers of Ontario, both private and public, and said clearly that New Democrats believe that the bringing in of the private interests into our electricity system have not benefited Ontarians. I got a mixed response, frankly, from the table, as you can imagine. But one of the things that the private sector energy producers would say to me, and that they thought that it was a great system. They were doing very well by that system. Well, of course they were. They were doing very, very well by that system. The problem is Ontario isn't doing very well by that system, right? Our rates are very high. They're not very competitive. And when we didn't have that kind of a model, our rates were much more competitive. And in fact, the provinces that maintained a public model when it comes to to electricity continue to have rates that are less or that are half or more than half of what our rates are. I mean, we look to the provinces on either side of us, and that is definitely the case. Now, you can't unscramble the egg, and I'm certainly not someone who believes that you go and tear up contracts. I mean, that's not actually prudent, fiscally prudent, financially prudent. However, looking at ways to, for example, what we talked about in the last campaign, is have the Auditor General review the existing contracts. Are we getting value there as Ontarians? Are the contracts that we have ones that make sense for Ontario? And so that would be a start. We have a number of agencies in the electricity sector that we believe are quite create quite a bit of duplication and overlap. We'd like to see those agencies merge back together to some extent, get some savings there. We've talked about capping the salaries of the highest paid CEOs in that sector on the public side. We've also looked at the fact that there's about $1 billion annually that's basically going to subsidize the United States and other purchasers of our power. We subsidize the rates for other jurisdictions, and that's not good. So what we'd like to see in Ontario is our own kind of marketing function, so that we can market our energy for the benefit of the ratepayers here, so that we're not simply allowing the existing system to market energy when it's available. So, for example, in Manitoba, they have that function because it's a public system. They market their energy in a way that is beneficial price-wise to that province. We don't do that here in Ontario, and so we end up subsidizing the taxpayer here, or the ratepayer here, I guess you would say, is subsidizing rates to other jurisdictions. So we would like to put that marketing function, public marketing function, in place in Ontario. So I mean, there's a number of different things you can do to start to change the way the electricity system operates in Ontario. I know that the government is looking down the path of further privatizing of the electricity system. I don't think that that's proven to be the effective way forward. The rates that we have in this province are not just difficult for homeowners in terms of their ability to pay, but they're difficult for businesses and for manufacturing and for all kinds of different functions. It's becoming very, very difficult for Ontarians to compete, and I think that's it's a big piece of the solutions when you look at how do we increase investment here, how do you attract more investment. We have to have an environment where the costs are reasonable, and in the electricity system they are not.
I think we all agree it's certainly a key opportunity area for us to get at, and that needs our focused time and attention. So Absolutely. Thank you. I'll try one final question, and we'll have to be brief. I think we're getting a little tight on time. But the third one is really around the increasing focus of some Canadian governments, including some NDP governments, to turn to alternative service delivery models to improve service quality. For example, I understand in Nova Scotia recently, they partnered with IBM to deliver technology services for the healthcare sector. So where do you stand on partnering with private and not-for-profit sectors to deliver public services?
Well, you know, it's interesting when I look at what the Auditor General of Ontario has done in terms of the work that the former Auditor General Jim McCarter did in looking at alternative service delivery. His report that he published a couple of years ago was very clear, and it was a value for money kind of review of the alternative financing and procurement system in Ontario. And he found that in fact it was not beneficial financially for the province, that in fact it was costing the people of Ontario much more to continue to undertake activities in that way. I mean, the idea of moving risk to the private sector, I mean, I understand, the theory behind that, but when it comes to the dollars and cents, that's where you have to, that's where the rub comes. And what his analysis is that when it comes to the dollars and cents, it in fact didn't make sense. Look, I know that this is something that was done in Nova Scotia. One of the things I can say for sure is that, various NDP governments have done various things, and I don't necessarily agree with everything that has been done by NDP governments in the past, or nor will I in the future, likely. So I would take every situation, and look at it in terms of what it means for Ontario. But I mean, there are other situations where we've seen the not-for-profit sector, for example, involved in delivery of service. And I think of our home care sector, for example, where there used to be quite an involvement of the not-for-profit sector in the delivery of home care services. Now, it's certainly not an AFP model of the type you're talking about. I think one of the things that needs to be always kept in mind is that if you're delivering a public service, then it's the public interest. The public interest always has to be at the top of any agenda. And so I understand that there's a desire to see more from the private sector, more public activities being delivered through the private sector, because that helps with with the growth in the private sector. It helps with profits and generating of income and revenues for private sector companies. But when the interest is all about, or when the desire is all about making sure that the private sector is able to take advantage of public dollars to get involved in the delivery of public types of services, and the focus is no longer about what kind of quality and what kind of government capacity to maintain policy control over various services and various types of activity, then that's when I get concerned. I mean, I'm from Hamilton. We have a hospital that went through a kind of a morphed model. So it was a traditional hospital, and a new section was built in an AFP model. And we had a serious problem about a year ago, and it was the pipes, frankly, that went from one building to the other burst and flooded the entire hospital. It created all kinds of problems. Now, I don't have the detailed results of the work that was done to find out exactly what the problem was, but for me it was kind of symbolic that we had the pipe that was going into the new alternative finance, part of the building. Right. It burst, and so we see what's happened in Windsor with the building of the Herb Gray Parkway. We saw issues around quality of the materials being used in that piece of infrastructure. We have to be very, very diligent, I think, and very, very careful about the tax dollar and the value that we get when we undertake these kinds of projects. But we also have to look carefully at whether or not we're disadvantaging our own companies and our own capacity here in Ontario when it comes to some of these initiatives. I mean, there's definitely a problem in this province now where we have Infrastructure Ontario bundling these infrastructure projects to the extent that they're so huge that our own firms, our own Ontario firms, are not able to bid on the tenders because they're too big. They don't have the fiscal capacity. They don't have the capital necessary to actually qualify to bid on the projects in Ontario. And so that's sending up alarm bells around the province. We're not having our own architects, our own designers. We're not having our own construction firms, our own management firms that are overseeing these projects, and it can cause some trouble. And so I don't think it's a matter of being like ideologically stuck on for example, local procurement policies. I do believe that those things are important and they do help us. But I think when you have to actually look at what's occurring when you bring these models into play, do the analysis and don't stubbornly stick to something for an ideological reason, but actually look at whether it's working or it's not.
Thank you. And I think the message I hear there is really taking a holistic, all-in view of things and not through a singular lens.
Absolutely.
So thank you. So with that, Andrea, I'd like to really, on behalf of all of us, thank you for being with us here today, again, especially in light of the circumstances, and really appreciate you sharing your views and comments with us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.